friends, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Kathleen, and here we talk about all things bookish. And this video is no different as we are going to be diving into my 2025 reading wrap up. So let's go ahead and jump into it. First things first, we're going to be diving into the statistics. I utilize Storygraph for the bulk of my statistics, but I also have a reading journal. So there are going to be some places where they kind of like contradict, but we'll navigate that. So let's talk about how many books did I read for 2025. I read a grand total of 105 books, which according to Storygraphs relates to 37,503 pages. The first book that I started off the reading year with was Set My Heart on Fire by Izumi Suzuki. The last book that I read for the 2025 reading year was Soul Searching by Lila Sage. So next up, we have the top genres that I read in 2025, and this is where me and Storygraph kind of tussle at because they have romance as my top genre, with me reading over 26 books in the romance genre, and that is categorically untrue. Um, when I look at it, it's because they are counting any book or any story that has a romance subplot as part of that book as romance. And that does not a romance make. So indeed, the top genres, according to my reading journal, and basing that on the primary genre that these books are categorized under, would be contemporary literary, mystery as one, mystery thriller as number two, and fantasy rounding all off at number three. Those were the primary genres that I read from in 2025. When it comes to the longest book that I read this past year, that belongs to Blood Marked by Tracy Dion. That is a total of 561 pages. The shortest book is The Sublet by Greer Hendricks, which is a novella, and that was 53 pages. The average length for the books that I was reading in 2025 was around 365 pages, with my average time to finish books being about 16 days. I think the shortest time that I spent reading a book was 2 days, and that was First Time Caller by B.K. Borison. And the longest time that I spent reading a book was A Sky Full of Love by Lorna Lewis, and that was 159 days. Authors that were frequently on repeat for me in 2025, according to Storygraph, they are primarily discussing three authors, with them being Ling Ling Huang, Sylvia Moreno Garcia, and B.K. Borison, as I read two books from these authors. But they failed to include Imani Perry, which I did read two books by her, Stephen Graham Jones, which I also read two books from him as well. My average rating for the year was 4.13 stars, as I feel like as a returning reader, I really narrowed and honed in on what I like and what my taste is. And I think that this star rating truly reflects that. And when it comes to 5-star reads, I had a total of 47. Yes, a 47 5-star reads in 2025. And yeah, I think that just, again, it just bolsters the fact that I know what I like, I know what I want, and I know how to pick books that align with my tastes. And when it comes to the best reading months in 2025, I have 2 months that are I would consider my best reading months of the year. And that would be October. October was my best reading month because I was in that month, I got a rating of 4.5 stars. So I had a really good and a really strong reading month with books that I loved and that I enjoyed. And next up, January was a great reading month for me because that is when I got the most pages read. I read a total of 5,252 pages in January, getting the year off to a phenomenal start. Now, my worst reading month of the year would have to be July. I was doing a lot of traveling during that time, so I only managed to read, I do believe, 2 to 3 books that month, and I was not enjoying what I was reading. My average rating for July was 3.5 stars. Some other cool facts about my reading year was that in 2025, I was very experimental, and I read over 81 new to me authors. I also read 21 different books that were part of a series. I had a total of 3 rereads this past year, and I DNF'd a total of 2 books, which I think that's phenomenal. Okay, so now let's switch it up, get a little bit more philosophical, and dive into my reading journal where I'm going to be kind of going through my 2025 yearly reflection and diving into how I actually went about achieving my goals and my reading goals for the year. So, first up, when it comes to the number of books that I ended up reading in 2025 and the goal that I set for myself, I fell short of that goal by 15 books, as my original goal was to read 120 books in 2025, and I only managed to get to 105 books. So, I had an 85% success rate in achieving my reading goals this year. When it comes to my other reading goals outside of the quantity of books that I wanted to read and kind of dictating what I wanted to get into and how I wanted to explore other genres and whatnot, I set 5 different goals, and I only achieved 2 of those goals, but let's talk about the goals that I set. So, my first goal was to explore sci-fi, horror, history, and politics and other like nonfiction genres. And I say that I succeeded in this goal. I did read a lot of different sci fi and speculative fiction this year, which I really, really enjoyed. And I found some new authors that I appreciated and that I liked in that particular genre. I also got out of my comfort zone of only reading and reaching for contemporary and literary fiction and was exploring more horror and rediscovering my enjoyment of the horror genre this year as well. I did read more or some nonfiction books. I fell in love with Imani Perry's work, and I can't wait to explore more of her backlist in this new year. I did read some political books. I was also starting to kind of veer out and read books within the social sciences category and just really having fun um, reading different nonfiction books and exploring other genres and getting outside of my comfort zone. So I feel like I did a good job of accomplishing that goal and really shaking up my reading and diversifying it a little bit more. Now, when it comes to reading 2 nonfiction books per month, I did not succeed in this goal. I failed miserably. I was not able to pull off reading 2 nonfiction books per month. I think a lot of that had to do with sometimes with nonfiction, it's not when you're reading nonfiction, it's not the kind of experience that you have with fiction, right? You can't just get into a nonfiction and just like rapidly sit and read it for 2, 3 hours. It's something that you actually want to take your time to properly comprehend the context and what's happening in the book. You want to take your time and read it and then step away and digest what you've read. I think if you're trying to like read and consume nonfiction books through like one sitting, it's not going to stick with you or hit with you the same. And it can easily become boring. And I think since I was approaching reading nonfiction the same way that I would approach reading fiction, that's why I was struggling because in reality, it was taking me a little bit longer to get through these books. So I think that that's kind of why I didn't excel and I didn't achieve that goal. Now, when it comes to my third goal that I set up for myself, I set out to participate in more like reading challenges or to do different reading challenges throughout the year to kind of help me get out of my comfort genre and to diversify my reading a little bit. And I failed at this goal. And I failed at this goal because I overwhelmed myself. So I am a very all or nothing person. And I decided to join and try to do all these different reading challenges at once instead of picking one and sticking to it. I was trying to do 3 or 4 different reading challenges. And again, I overwhelmed myself and it wasn't realistic when I was looking at my patterns and behaviors when it comes to me picking books and reading books and whatnot. It didn't work. Next, we have from one of my reading goals for 2025 was to collect more special editions and more signed copies of books. And I did achieve and excel in this goal. I have a few copies of signed books from authors that I enjoy and that I appreciate, which is great. And I also have more special edition books. I did join a couple of book subscriptions that provide or that give special editions. That book club that I joined was Satisfiction, and they prioritize platforming and supporting BIPOC and marginalized authors within the fantasy genre. And I joined that subscription club. It's like a bi-monthly membership. And I love those special editions. I love that they're not just your typical popular fantasy books, that there's some obscure authors, there are a lot of indie authors, and I really appreciate that. The books are gorgeous. I love that I'm supporting a BIPOC owned business and phenomenal. But they also launched two other subscription box services under their one umbrella company. That would be Cover Snob, which prioritizes more romance books. And the other one I think is Black Raven Books, and that's more of their mystery thriller book subscription. And I joined both of those, and I've gotten books from both of those, and they're phenomenally done. I really love and appreciate them. And I'm so glad that I'm supporting that particular book subscription company. Love them. Highly recommend that you check them out. They are on Instagram under Satisfiction Books. Check them. And my last goal for 2025 was to read more ebooks or read more books on my Kindle. And I failed at this goal. I think I failed at this goal for a combination of reasons. One of the primary reasons being since Kindle is digital and I don't see the books, it's very out of sight, out of mind. So I forget that I have ebooks on my Kindle and I forget to pick it up and to check in with it and to read those books because it's out of sight, out of mind. I'm very much and I prioritize physical books over digital. So physical books, you see them and it's harder to forget them. So that's why I'm more prone to pick up a physical book and, go read a physical book off of my physical TBR or even go to the library and pick up a physical book because, again, I'm very much a person who likes and prefers reading a physical book. So that's kind of why I didn't do so well at exploring and reading more ebooks off of my Kindle. Hopefully for 2026, I can do better at that. Okay, so now let's talk about what were the standout books for 2025. And we're just going to go right into it. My book of the year, my favorite book is Junie by Aaron Crosby Eckstein or Eckstein. I love this book down. It was such a phenomenal book about me. The reason that I loved it, I've I've talked about it so much, but the reason that I love this book so much is because of its exploration of identity and that it was a coming of age story. But I felt like it's different than many of the coming of age stories that we read about or see because it is featuring a female protagonist, a Black female protagonist that is that's an enslaved person in the antebellum South. And we're seeing how her struggling with her identity and coming of age and figuring out who she is under this current state and time where there is oppression on Black people and they're being told what their identity is and they're being treated as property and they have no autonomy and no freedom to do or pursue a life according to what they want and how they want to design it. And I thought that it was phenomenally written. It was a very emotional experience and I really enjoyed it. It's my favorite book of 2025 and I highly recommend it. We already went over my longest book, which was Blood Marked by Tracy Dion, but I also really enjoyed that book. I really enjoy the Legend Born Cycle series. It's just such a cathartic young adult series for me. I just feel it in my bones. I love it. I appreciate it. I want to read Oathbound, but I'm not so quick to say that I'm going to read it in 2026 because we don't know when the next book in the series is going to be released. And I would rather wait till we get a release date for the next book so that I can properly plan reading it. and then getting the next book in the series, but we'll see what happens with that. Now, when it comes to my most memorable book will be Salt Bones by Jennifer Given. I love this book so much. I love the prose. Her prose is very poetic, it's very lyrical, it's very lush, it's very atmospheric, and it just really invites you into the story. It's immersive, it's palpable, it's evocative. Loved it. I loved the story. I loved the deeper themes that were inside of this novel. I loved everything about it, and I cannot wait to explore more books by this author because it was a phenomenal experience. And I read this in October, and it was the perfect book, the perfect vibes for the spooky season. I adore this book. When we dive into the more reflective portion of this and we go into these questions that are really, which I really appreciate that this reading journal does have these more introspective questions that is really like challenging you to think about why or why you didn't achieve your goals so that it helps prepare you for the next year and that you can better create better goals. Yeah. So it says, have I met my reading goals this year? Why or why not? And of course, I didn't reach many of my reading goals as we just went over. But I think that the reason that I didn't reach these reading goals as I sit down and I really reflect and I really think back on it is because I set myself up for failure. I wasn't creating goals grounded in reality. I didn't allow myself any space or flexibility for life to happen and for me to pivot and change and kind of like tweak my goals so that they were better for me. They were better. It was better for me to kind of like navigate them a little in a different way or come at them from a different angle due to how my life was changing and fluctuating at the time. I wasn't spending time reflecting on my goals monthly or quarterly or what have you. I was kind of just doing everything everywhere all at once. So I think having that chaotic energy when it came to my goals is another reason, and not properly setting the right goals in the first place is what led me to not having a successful of a year in terms of achieving goals. Which book had the biggest impact on me and how has it impacted my life or thoughts? That would, of course, be Junie by Aaron Crosby Eckstein. And I think that this book it was the biggest impact for me last year because again it really does do some really it challenges you to really think about the way that you perceive and that you view identity and how being able to pursue and live your life the way that you want to and the freedom and the autonomy and all of that is such a beautiful gift that I think that sometimes we do take for granted that we can just kind of like get up, wake up and do things and pursue a life the way that we see fit. Now there are of course within that framework of being said, there are of course things and systems set up in our society that doesn't make that easier for many people. It does make that a lot more challenging for BIPOC and marginalized people. But I don't know. I think the way that that book explored that topic and the way that it makes you think about it is really, it's really thought provoking. And I really appreciated that. Next, we have overall, how has reading improved my life this year? And wow. I think reading has improved my life this year because every book that I read for the most part was something that shifted my perspective, challenged the way that I view myself, the way that I view other people, the way that I view the world, the way that I interact and engage with society, and basically allowed me to make the necessary shifts when it comes to how I treat others, when it comes to how I show up in the world, and doing the work of making me a better person and making me rethink what I value and maybe tweaking them a little bit. And I feel like that's the purpose of a good book. It is to challenge you in those ways and to help you and guide you in interacting with the world in a different way and developing more empathy. So, yeah. What do I hope to achieve with my reading in the next year. And I think with my reading in the next year, I really hope to achieve more systemic, well, I think for the next year, I want to be able, and I'm working on creating more realistic, sustainable goals that allow space for flexibility where I can tweak and adjust and pivot when I need to and as is necessary, and how taking that more, I don't want to say reactive, but taking that more engaged and intentional approach will help me grow as a reader and allow me to make reading a sustainable and realistic hobby and habit, and make it a part of just my daily life and routine. And overall, when it comes to this kind of thought or this kind of belief that in order to really truly have a successful reading year, you have to hit and achieve all of your goals. You have to read this high number of books or like hit or succeed your goal, and that's the only way to have a successful, accomplished, good reading year. I don't think that's necessarily true because I think that this reading year was probably the best reading year I've had in a long time, maybe throughout my reading history. I think that it was probably one of the best years because I was a bit more intentional, even though I was a little bit exuberant and I kind of went overboard. I still was a bit more intentional. I still was working to not be passive and be more active in my reading, where I was making sure that I was diversifying what I was reading. I was exploring different genres, exploring different authors, making sure I was not only reading about authors that looked like me, which is also important, but also challenging myself to read from authors and read about experiences from people that don't look like me, and allowing that to help me see how diverse the world is, but also how, in so many ways, we are all at our core very similar in helping to develop empathy and understanding and respect for other people. And I also feel like it taught me about how to set realistic goals. Um, how to maybe not necessarily go the route of overconsumption and trying to buy, own, and acquire all the books, but to really take time and be present with what I have and consuming that first and not letting capitalism rule me when it comes to my bookish hobby and pursuits. It's I feel like this reading year it was amazing because it taught me about how to make reading a sustainable habit. I was going through a lot in my life and there was a lot of transition and a lot of changes that were happening. And usually whenever that would happen to me, I would just stop reading and I would put it aside and I wouldn't read anymore. But from this year I learned and I saw that no, indeed I made reading a priority and I made it something that I continually would go back to and that I would pick up and that I would make space for in my life, as opposed to just saying I'm too busy and I can't do it. Indeed, I didn't do that. And that's how I was able to, even though I didn't reach my goal, I still read a high number of books, especially when we compare it to previous years. Or I think in 2024, I read a grand total of 88 books. 2023, I read, I do believe, 49 books. And in 2022, I read maybe 25 books. So each year I get progressively better and I read a higher number of books. And I can only think that I'm growing and learning and evolving and changing. And so I do believe that this was a phenomenal and an excellent reading year, despite not hitting all of these goals, these arbitrary goals or whatever. When we look back at just the quality and the way that it had such a profound impact on me, I had an excellent reading year. And I'm not going to get lost in the sauce about not hitting a goal, or not like doing all of these different things. It doesn't mean anything in the grand scheme of the things. And it's just feedback and information for how you can pivot and change and do better in the future and to come at it from a different angle so that you can be more successful when it comes to achieving your overall goals. I'm a very big believer of fail forward. So, yeah, I'm happy with my reading year and I'm happy with where I ended up. And I look forward to having a phenomenal 2026 of reading. And for all of that, that is all for this video today. Let me know how your 2025 was when it comes to your year of reading and how you're feeling about where you ended up and where you landed and how that is going to inform you when it comes to how you decide to make goals and pursue reading in the 2026 reading year. Make sure that you like, comment, and subscribe and keep your eyes peeled as I will be having another video where I'm diving into my 2026 reading goals for this year and what I'm looking forward to accomplishing in the first quarter. So I will see you then and have a good one. Bye.